chiropractor in downtown Cedar Rapids, and I have been specializing in fertility, pregnancy, prenatal, postpartum, really for the entire 10 years that I've been practicing. And I'm certified in functional medicine through the AFRAM, which is like the major functional medicine association. And a lot of times the office does not look like a traditional chiropractor. So if in your brain you're thinking like walk in, rack and crack them, walk out, we're like on another level. But I like it. I love it. It is, it's a lot more diversity and a lot like wider scope for me. And a lot of that is nutrition. I've been incorporating nutrition from the very beginning, incorporating lab testing from the very beginning. And I often do my best to just blend the like structural care, nutritional care, and emotional care for these issues like fertility or hormonal imbalances. Sometimes it's turns into like a natural urgent care, and I've like got kids in with pink eye and like all kinds of wild stuff. So it just kind of grows the longer I practice. But I probably get asked, is this a good prenatal, or would this be a good option for prenatal, or what should I take for fertility, like 10 times a week? So you guys got the right nerd for the job. I'm prepared. And if you have questions at the end, please let me know. You can go ahead and switch to the next one, Megan. And I just want to mention that like if I ever am saying like an alternative to IVF or IUI, I don't necessarily mean like anti-medical. I get women who come in and they're like, I can't afford IVF or IUI or further interventions. And so I need you to just make me the best I can be before I get to that point, so I don't have to use that. And then I have women who come in and we're just prepping their bodies so that hopefully we can do one round of IVF instead of 4+ rounds, and just use their time, their energy more efficiently that way too. You'll hear me mention Mercier Therapy. One of 3 practitioners in Iowa that does Mercier Therapy. The other 2 are in Des Moines, and it'll come up again in kind of like the non-nutritional stuff, but it's really like a gentle way to increase blood flow to the pelvic organs, moving those around from the outside, just really helpful if you've had like previous scar tissue, whether that's fibroids, endometriosis, or this is secondary infertility after a C-section, that kind of thing. So that I'll kind of talk about why structural and emotional stuff is important, even relating back to the supplements that you would take. So all right, so I like to break down supplements for fertility into like 3 different tiers. So the first one would be foundational support, which goes for men too. That would be like your multivitamin or prenatal and an omega. Omega-3s, they're anti-inflammatory. We'll dig more into it. That second level or second tier would be some upgrades that typically would come in the form of antioxidants, also good for men. Like lots of research that men need to be taking these too. And there are a lot of antioxidants, but I will get into 2 that just have way more research behind them and have proven to be pretty effective for fertility specifically. And then the third tier, which is kind of where it gets really interesting for me. So the first 2 tiers kind of apply to everybody and their partners. The third tier is where it gets interesting. And this is when we get into things that are not for everyone, but can like really make or break it's not only like someone's whole health, but also their fertility journey, like uncovering some gut issues or resolving some gut issues can often bring some relief for me. Also like thyroid support. Sometimes people just making sure their thyroid is all in check and supported. That can help a lot with pregnancy. So PCOS, irregular cycles, again, there are supplements for those things that are not for everybody, and you probably don't need to try half of them. But when that is you, it's really important. And then we'll talk about a couple non-nutritional factors too, as we get to the end there. So this chart just kind of organizes the nutrients. I don't need to go through like exactly what's in a prenatal or what's in a multivitamin, but just in case this helps your brain a little bit better, kind of those foundational nutrients that you need to keep mom going and build a baby are in that top part. So that's your B vitamins, vitamin D, minerals, omega-3. Collagen you won't necessarily find in a prenatal. It might be something that you take separately, or if you are a meat eater, like you'll probably get collagen. So you may or may not need extra unless you're dealing with soft tissue injuries, or you're kind of at that 35+ age and trying to conceive. Antioxidants, like I said, there are a lot of them. Their main goal is increasing cell quality by mitigating cellular damage. So we have all these like toxins flying around us, and we have, exercise actually in a good way creates cellular stress. We just need to be able to repair it afterwards. That's where antioxidants come into play. Some nutrients that are great for egg development in particular are listed there. Half of those are antioxidants also. They're just really good for the egg cell itself. And then there's some herbal things listed down here that help with stress management and hormone balance. So I mentioned that there are some other things that are not nutrients that we do that will affect the nutrients that we do need to take, or supplements we do need to take. One of those is stress control in a big way. So when you get stressed out, your stress hormone is called cortisol. Hopefully that's somewhat familiar. When your cortisol goes up, it steals your progesterone, which progesterone is literally like, it's named progesterone because it's promoting gestation, right? It is like keeping you pregnant. So the more stressed out you are, the less progesterone you have available to use in your body. And if we can't mitigate that stress from an emotional perspective, then sometimes an herbal supplement will be really helpful because it will kind of help tone down that cortisol so that you get to keep that progesterone that will keep that pregnancy going. Perfect. So let's start with that first tier. This is like the foundational basics that guys and girls can both take. To be really honest, prenatal is a fancy term for a multivitamin. It's a marketing term purely. So don't get worked up if you find a really good multivitamin that like sits really well with you and really seems to help, but it doesn't say prenatal. Don't sweat. It's helpful in like maybe guiding where to look, and it's definitely helpful as far as like narrowing your Google search and stuff like that, but it is pretty much like bare bones of multivitamin. We like it because it's going to cover nutritional gaps. Everybody eats differently. Everybody's getting different quality food. Everybody's metabolic needs are different. So we just want to make sure that we have enough nutrients to cover all the gaps, to build that baby, to support good egg quality, make sure we're ovulating, fetal development. But there's like a million prenatals, right? And there's a million places to get prenatals. And it used to be that you could kind of only get really solid multivitamins by going through a physician. In a good way, that's not true now, but it is harder to kind of figure out what the high quality things are. So I would say my fastest, like if someone brings me a prenatal, which is often, a lot of times I'm seeing women in like two categories. They like, one, they take nothing or like a single Flintstones vitamin, or they take a full basket of 30 things they ordered off of Instagram because an influencer said so. So we don't want to do either. And when someone brings me a prenatal, is like, is this a good one? The first thing I do personally is the same thing you can do, which is I flip it to the back where all the nutrients are listed. And I look at the B vitamins, particularly B9 and B12. So B9, the name for the natural form that you would find in nature is called folate. In synthetic science world, it's called folic acid. And you want folate in your prenatal. And sometimes they'll do this thing that drives me nuts. Well, they will say 600 micrograms of folate as folic acid in parentheses. It's still folic acid if it says that. The reason this is important is because if you've been in fertility land long enough, you may have heard the term MTHFR, which is like, everybody's nodding like, yes, that did come up on my blog post scroll. So why that's important is it's basically a gene that puts like little carbon tags on stuff in our body so that our body can complete processes. And if you have a genetic defect in this tagging gene, you cannot process folic acid. Well, that happens to be like 50 to 70% of the population. So most people cannot handle or cannot utilize folic acid in a synthetic form, but it's cheaper. So it gets into the, like the Target prenatal and the lower cost stuff. There are some brands that are kind of figuring out that that's a big deal and are switching over online, but for the most part, anything at a big box store off the shelf is going to have folic acid in it. So also the tricky part is your OB is probably going to say, just go get a prenatal, something with folic acid, because in their head, that's not different than folate. But it is when you get into like the really nitty gritty of like how these things break down and how they're used in your cells. It's going to be the same thing with B12. So B12 is called cobalamin. If it's synthetic, it's called cyanide. I said cyanide. We're getting there. Cyanocobalamin. And if it's natural, it's called methylcobalamin. And that's just like the more usable form is that methylcobalamin. If you can't use genetically that cyanocobalamin, it does kind of build up with this like extra unneeded chemical that resembles cyanide. It's that same prefix there. So that's the quick check. If you're going to take anything, flip it to the back, make sure it says methylfolate, methylcobalamin. That's a good, you're starting off on the right foot there. So the next thing to look for would be at the minerals. A lot of pregnant patients will come to me and say, my OB wanted me to be on iron. I took it and it wrecked my stomach and I got constipated and all of these things. And why that happens is, again, they'll use a synthetic form that's not connected to part of a protein. When you connect a mineral to a protein, you just don't get constipated and it's a lot easier to absorb it because your body's kind of already like halfway there. So when you find that on a label, it looks like something like zinc chelate. There will be an extra 8 ATE word at the end. So those would be like the big things that I look at. When you get a higher quality supplement, generally you can take less capsules and get more out of it, as opposed to getting like a cheaper one and needing to take like 5 capsules or 5 gummies or whatever you're looking for that way. So again, the prenatal is really just a multivitamin. It's going to cover your basics. It's your insurance policy. But we do really want to go quality over quantity. So the next part of that foundational support would be an omega-3. Most of the time, this comes in the form of a fish oil. And this is important because omega-3s are like the major tissue in your brain tissue. It's also the insulation around every nerve. So when you look at like any of like the wire, think picture like the wire coming out of like your curling iron or your phone charger, it's insulated so that the electricity coming from one end to the other isn't just flying out the sides of that wire. That's what an omega-3 is doing. It's insulating all of those nerves and insulating that brain tissue so that all of the signals are flowing smoothly instead of like going haywire out the sides and not getting to the end point that we want them to. DHA and EPA are both types of omega-3s. So if you see a prenatal that says like with DHA, that's good. But again, I would probably suggest taking a separate one just so your dose is high enough. Pretty much everyone can take it 1 gram or 2. I was selfishly and probably vainly told at a seminar that if I took 2, I would avoid getting stretch marks. I took 2 every day. So I was committed. But again, guys can also take this. They also have brains and nerves that need insulated. You may have heard that term like pregnancy brain, where it's you forgot your keys were in the fridge or something like that. And that happens because that insulation goes down in a new mom because she has given all of her insulation to the baby because the baby needed it more, and nature was like, you'll go bite some, you'll be fine. We're going to give it to your baby first. So that's kind of where that mom brain feeling comes from. All right, these are examples of some brands. You have this good for mamas. This is, guys, this is like a hot new release. You really lucked out. So this is from a company that I have used forever called Supreme Nutrition. It's where I get all the herbal stuff that I help patients deal with, like infections and the stress adaptogens I mentioned earlier. They just came out with this a couple of months ago. So super high quality. I love this because the people who run this company are so picky about like purity and potency, and there's like nothing extra, no fillers, anything like that that you would have to worry about being sensitive to. A good example of a multivitamin that's not a prenatal that I just kind of use like a prenatal in my practice is on that far side over there called Regenerzyme Heart. That's an organ-based multi that has some actually desiccated or dried heart tissue in it. Has been really effective as a prenatal. This is my preferred omega-3. It's called OrthoMega from a company called Ortho Molecular. I actually saw it at when I got my daughter's glasses fixed, and they had it on the shelf at the eye doctor, and I was psyched because I was like, good, more people can get to it. I like this one in particular because the biggest complaint with omega-3s is that feeling of like a weird burp afterwards, and it's kind of fishy, and nobody is interested in that. And this is like the one omega-3 where I've never, ever, ever in 10 years had someone report having a weird burp afterwards. So that's why I have a bias, because I'm against weird burping. I will, like I said, it was available at the eye doctor. You can also order it online, but you have to order it through a physician. There's a link that will come later in the slides. It's also in my Instagram bio, but it basically kind of gives you access to a catalog, and you could just kind of submit a request to me and I say, yes, they can order that. It's really easy peasy that way. And that way you have access to like a ton of brands. I'm not particularly like tied to one brand or the other. I just found really early on that if it was good and it helped a patient, I wanted it. I did not care about sticking with one company or anything like that. So my office has probably like 7 to 10 different lines, just because I want what works more than anything. Okay. Yeah, okay, this is my big reminder that like prenatal, when you're on an infertility journey, like now is not the time for gummies and candies and that kind of thing, unless you truly just can't swallow a capsule, which I do have patients that can't. They can't hang, we have to do all liquids or chewables or something like that. But if by any means possible, you can upgrade to something higher quality, it is important, and we want that to happen at least 3 to 6 months before you're planning to conceive, or like before you were to do IVF or IUI or something like that, because the egg that you're going to ovulate in 3 months is forming right now. So you want to change the quality right now. Even if you only have X number of eggs for the rest of your life, you can change the quality drastically. And that happens in about 3 months at a minimum. So you want to give yourself like that 3-month window. Okay, so then that second tier I mentioned is antioxidants, which tons of research to prove that taking extra antioxidants, again, because we just live in a world where we can't control everything, and you can't control the air, and you can't control your, your water quality precisely everywhere you go and that kind of thing. So there are things that can damage reproductive cells. We want to prevent that. One of the best ones that I have found is called NAC. It's also like top support for someone going through PCOS. It is a precursor to what they call like the master antioxidant that like does the most scavenging and saving in your body, called glutathione. And it also helps detox estrogen when you have too much estrogen, which is another thing that can limit the ability to get pregnant, is when your estrogen is way too high. Supports your egg quality and your uterine health, and improves insulin sensitivity. Like I said, very crucial for PCOS. And then the next one, look to that next one. CoQ10 is just also the name of another antioxidant. Ideally, you want to find it in a form called biquinol. Again, we just like ideal, the most efficiently usable form versus like what's common and cheap. So, again, it helps protect DNA from damage and supports those ovaries to have a lot more energy production, which they need if they're going to build a new egg take 3 months and then ovulate every month. So particularly in women over 35, or if you have a low ovarian reserve, CoQ10 is going to be your friend. It's going to be your partner's friend. Worth investing in on that one. You don't necessarily have to pick both antioxidants, by the way. You might start, if you have not ventured there, you might start with one and just kind of see how you feel and how you do. All right. Oh, okay. So this is that kind of third tier where it's kind of like not everybody needs these, but they could make a huge difference if it worked with the right person to figure that out. So the first one would be gut health. So if you're someone who is constantly complaining of like chronic constipation, like I have a lot of women who come in and they're like, I maybe go twice a week to the bathroom. That is a sign to me that we probably got an infection in there. That's just not enough that it makes you go to like urgent care or your MD or something like that. Bloating all the time, pain after you eat in your stomach, really high anxiety. Those would all be clues to me where like I'm gonna go hunt for that infection before I address something else. So a lot of times there's kind of an antimicrobial herb for everything, which is nice. You don't necessarily always have to go to an antibiotic first, particularly if it's not bacterial. That wouldn't help anyway. So like I said, most of the time you can do that herbally. And then leaky gut, if you're not familiar with the term, basically means that lining that goes from your mouth all the way through your digestive tract. We want it to kind of be like a privacy fence, and things enter and exit through really well-controlled gates. Sometimes that privacy fence turns into like a chain link fence after a lot of GI issues or antibiotic exposure or something like that. So sometimes we just need to seal up that lining, switch it back to more of a privacy fence than a chain link fence. If you are someone who is trying to conceive with PCOS, inositol is going to be your friend. I've had women go from not ovulating to ovulating just by adding that one thing in. It helps with, again, blood sugar sensitivity, because PCOS is really more of a metabolic thing than it is a hormonal thing. So that's a good one for that. Dan Shen might also be a good option. That's an herbal that just helps with blood flow and make sure that we're getting enough blood to the uterus and the ovaries, because if you don't have enough blood in your uterus, you can't build a lining. And if you can't have a lining, there's no place for an egg to go and implant. If you have irregular cycles or like really hard periods, lots of bleeding or weird spotting, or your, your cycles are really close together, really far apart, then you would want to look more at things like chaste tree or shatavari, which are herbals that will like boost and balance hormones. Rosemary is one that is, if you're estrogen dominant, it will help get rid of extra estrogen. If like inklings that someone is estrogen dominant, they're like super high strung all the time. Like something will set them off constantly. Also, if the bleeding part of their cycle is the worst part or the most complicated part, that's often an estrogen issue. And then the last kind of condition specific thing that you might look for is thyroid support. So if you're trying to conceive and no one has run a full thyroid panel on you, put it on the list or call me and I'll do it. But in a full thyroid panel should not just be one or two hormones. That is another thing that I see often, is it'll just be TSH and T4. Sorry. A more full thyroid panel would be actually have like 6 to 7 things on it. So again, if your doctor's running your thyroid, but it's 1 or 2 things, just shoot me an email and I'll at least send you the list of what a full thyroid panel is. And a lot of times doctors won't run them because they're like, well, I wouldn't know what to do with that if it came back. Then let's chat. All right. Okay, so that's kind of like a concise version of all the things that you could do, which is a big topic. So we're gonna keep working through it, but when we're talking about where to buy stuff, I want you to avoid big box stores and Amazon. Don't hate me for saying that, because I know it's convenient. But what, like the guy, girl, whoever does the purchasing for Target is really not motivated by like what's the most effective supplement. They want to know what sells. They like a cute label. I also like a cute label. That's why you got the pink one with the cool font. I'm completely swayed by marketing. So I understand. I am the victim. That being said, they're looking for something that's going to fly off the shelves. They're not looking for something that has the right form of B vitamins that's most utilized in your body metabolically. So that's why I kind of want you to stay away from that. That being said, I mentioned earlier, there are now brands where you can order direct to consumer versus going through a physician every time. It used to be, because the really nerdy scientists who built these really potent, good supplements were like so afraid of putting them to the general public because they would kind of like lose their clout. Now we don't have to do that as much. There are some things that you still kind of need to get behind the veil, but so I would do that. Amazon I like to avoid because there are people who go through the trouble of like copying the label off a good product, putting it on a bad product, and then shipping that from a random seller on Amazon. You have no idea how long it was in a warehouse or if it got too hot or all that kind of stuff. So there's just like too many variables for me to order supplements off of Amazon. unless you know you're getting it like directly from the company that made it, and they just happen to have a listing on there instead. So something to think about. This QR code, which may or may not work because the bottom is a little blurry. This link is also in my Instagram bio. If it ends up being easier, it's up there too, but I know you guys can't like click on it right now. But what that does, it takes you to something called FullScript. FullScript is kind of like an online catalog that's like doctor approved. And you can make a profile, you can submit, I can submit a plan to you, you can kind of request a plan for me. It has way more brands on it, it has all the fish oil, all the orthomolecular stuff. And then brands like a lot of the herbal stuff I use and this prenatal that you guys got as the giveaway. Those are available on the Supreme Nutrition website. I think Good, like just the Good multi has its own even like separate website you can order from. So those you wouldn't have to go through anybody. But yeah, so lots of options and there's just so much, right? Like there's so many prenatals that exist that I was like, there's no way I can list all of them. I was kind of going with like stuff that I know is good that I've used before, but that's why I kind of gave you that test of like, we'll just flip it over, you know, see what's in it, that kind of thing to start with. Oh yeah, as far as pricing goes, some people get sticker shock, and I think just because I've dealt with supplements for a long time, it's not as shocking to me now. But the prenatal in front of you, that's like a $40 bottle. Amber, how much is in? Like how many capsules are in that one?
Maybe have 990.
990? 3-day, okay, so it's like a month's supply. That's pretty standard, just so you know. Anything lower than really like $30, I'm pretty skeptical of the quality. That being said, you do not need $100 prenatal. So if you're thinking like every dollar I pay is gonna give me a better product, not necessarily. So we don't really want extremes, right? We don't want the Flintstones, we don't want the laundry basket, but we also don't want like, you don't need the $100 prenatal, you don't need the $15 one either. So kind of maybe that's like your marker of like somewhere around 40. That fish oil, like I think is like 38. Again, between 30 and $40, just to kind of give you like a reasonable ballpark. And then I would say maybe pick like 2 other things that are either condition specific or like an extra antioxidant or something like that, unless you're working with a provider and the provider's like, here's your plan, we have some stuff figured out. You actually need 6 things. Even then, it should be temporary. Like you should be working through issues, not like on these things for life. So I even have people who like sometimes we need to rotate prenatals during a pregnancy because in the first trimester they don't sit as well or something like that. So we like fluidity, we like variety, that kind of thing. So go ahead and put Miss Megan. Good. Okay, so I touched on a couple like non-nutritional things. Again, I'll just kind of give the rundown because I know some of you are on like a very long journey. Some of you are just getting started. So if there's something that maybe like piques your interest that you just haven't tried yet, or you didn't even think like that would be connected at all, we'll go through why. So like I said, I like to treat people structurally, emotionally, nutritionally. Structurally, if you haven't been adjusted before, the whole goal of getting adjusted is so that your brain can send signals to your spinal cord, and then your spinal cord talks to your organs and your limbs. So there are nerve signals constantly going to your uterus and ovaries. If your brain can't talk to those organs, that might be one thing that's limiting you. So you might consider that someone who like really specifically cares for women. I mentioned Mercier therapy, a great option. Like I said, if it's secondary infertility, if you have some scar tissue, or you might have been formally diagnosed with, they call it pelvic congestion, which is a fancy term for there's a lot of stuff in your pelvis, you don't know what it is, and we think it's blocking some things. So that might be one thing to consider. And then maybe some kind of like nerve therapy or nerve rehabilitation. Again, if we're not getting signal from point A to point B, your uterus might not know what's going on and whether to engage at the right time or that sort of thing. Emotionally, we talked about stress absolutely lowers your progesterone, which would keep that pregnancy going. Stress also creates histamine, which is like, you probably have taken like a Benadryl in your life. Histamine is like the allergy chemical. when you're stressed out, your histamine goes higher. So it's almost like your whole body is having an allergic reaction to a certain degree. We want to mitigate stress as much as possible, which Hopeful Mama really like does have resources and people to connect you with for that. So even if you don't know where to look, like this is probably still a good place to start. And then when it comes to toxins, just be mindful of like stuff that has a ton of fragrance or cleaning products that are not organic. This I feel like is a place where people can really rabbit hole themselves and get really overwhelmed. They're like, I need to throw out everything I've ever had. And my best advice is just like, when you go to the store, like to replace something, just buy something that is a little less scented, okay? So don't freak out. You know, maybe ask for a water filter for your birthday, like a cool kid. All right, and then a couple of references that I have in my office and like really rely on for people when they want to dig further. The top one says Real Food for Pregnancy, but that author, Lily Nichols, also has released a Real Food for Fertility, and she's super smart. She actually started as a like diabetes counselor, nutritionist, and kind of like revolutionized diabetes or gestational diabetes with kind of her nutrition work, but has since like then really moved on, and her books are pretty easy to read, but also have a ton of information. Fertility Secrets is another good one, and then that Dr. Amatma has a good email list too if you're kind of looking for more natural medical information that way. It Starts with the Egg is another great one about egg quality. That's just like really dense info in a good way about how to improve the quality of the eggs that you do have. And then Dr. Mercier, who created that Mercier therapy, wrote a book called Conceive that is like kind of a short and sweet read, but talks about how that like structural component can affect fertility as well. So that one's kind of like light and easy compared to the others. But I did want to give you guys some time for questions, because I know there are a lot of options for nutrients and that kind of thing. So if you have some, if not, that's okay. But anything on anybody's mind? Yeah.
Like, can you suggest anything like any kind of foods to like kind of detox from the like fertility like IVF drug regimen? Because I'm like in the middle of it and I keep everything like, okay, this increases your rate of cancer and it seems like you have to focus on getting rid of like the estrogenic stuff.
Yes. Yeah. So she's asking, just for online people, she is asking like foods that would help get rid of the kind of byproducts of IVF meds. And really one of the best things you can do is just eat whole foods, like avoid processed stuff, because your liver and your kidneys are going to be what filter those IVF drugs. If your livers and kidneys are kind of gunked up with like fast food, oils, processed foods, anything that has a ton of ingredients in it, it has less allowance to then go spend and filter out your IVF medication. So really focusing just on that will take the burden off of your liver in a big way. Another really helpful one for cleaning out your liver is like cilantro. So putting cilantro on stuff or adding that into smoothies. You can even get cilantro like in tincture form. So that might be a good one if just in particular, if you feel like, yeah, like just bogged down by the chemical part of IVF, but totally understand that.
We have a question online. Best way or best supplement to support uterine lining.
Yeah, so that danshin that I mentioned, really good for building that blood flow and that uterine lining. It's an herbal, you can order it through Supreme Nutrition. The trick with danshin is you don't want to take it when you are pregnant. So you want to take it leading up to pregnancy, and then like if you're going to try on the first of the month, just go ahead and stop taking it. And unless, you know, like in 14 days later, you find out you're not pregnant, start again. But yeah, you don't want to take it and then get pregnant while you're on it. I don't really know that anything would happen, but because it's promoting blood flow, once we have that lining, we want to keep it. We don't want to push it through. So once, like I said, once you're like we're set to try on that day, then just kind of take a break from it, and you can always come back to it later. But especially if you're in that prep, like I'm going to prep for 3 to 6 months, that might be a good one. People also really like it because it increases your dopamine, which is like your happy chemical. So I've had some people go on it and they're like, I love this stuff. And I'm like, I know why. But yeah, that would be a great option.
If your partner, like my husband's taking nothing, if I wanted him to like start something, like it's his turn to take.
Yes, yeah.
What would you recommend?
I would go for like a good multivitamin. Get the manliest label you can find. No, guys like notoriously do not want to take anything, my own husband included. So yeah, unless he's like fully sick and has like a real sinus infection, I'm like, what should I take? But no, like it's not, you're not alone. Which is wild, right? Because they're like half of the whole equation and they just really don't want to take anything. And yeah, like I said, I've been practicing for 10 years with nutrition. I'm still like handing my husband some vitamins, like you can put these in your pocket and take them at work. Just tell me that you took them, you know, that kind of thing. So it's, I don't know. That's why our life expectancy is longer. I'm just gonna throw that out there. But yeah. Anything else? Yeah,
Is there such thing as taking two supplements?
I think so. I think it's part of it's just like you just don't need to spend the money on stuff that's like what I would call double dipping. So like if you're taking a multivitamin that has B vitamins and then you're gonna take a B complex, you're not gonna use all of that. It's particularly nutrients that you cannot store in fat. So vitamins A, D, E, and K, your body can store up in fat. It's why we get a bunch of vitamin D, hopefully from the sun in the summer. And it was meant to work that we kept that through the winter and just kind of used up our storage and then we refilled in the summer. But now a lot of times people need to supplement because they're just not getting as much sun because we're not outside as much. But if it's a B vitamin, you're just peeing out whatever you don't use. So if you take a ton of it all at one time and you're like double dipping, triple dipping, like you're not gonna use it. You're just gonna pee out bright yellow and yeah, so definitely don't need to do that. More from a financial perspective, from a chemical perspective, when you just kind of talk about like you're getting overloaded from IVF medications, you can do the same thing with supplements, especially if it's stuff that you're not using, or if you are an MTHFR person who's not processing certain forms of things that builds up inside. And so a lot of times for us, like when we go on vacation or something like that, we just don't take a lot with us. Like we kind of pause our current protocol unless we're working through something really specific, but that's kind of our break from the supplements. Or yeah, if we go somewhere for the weekend, we'll take them when we get back, as long as it's not something that's like making us function that day. So yeah, I think it's definitely okay to take a break and like you'll make it if you miss a day. Anything else? Yeah.
Is there anything you can recommend to negate like morning sickness and some of the early pregnancy symptoms?
Yeah, I was terribly ill both pregnancies. The best formula that I found was to take an isolated B6 and a Unisom, which is an over-the-counter sleep aid. And some people will say like that does the trick. For me, I kind of needed it to build up in my system for a couple of days. I did not, Zofran is typically the prescription one that they'll give you that like didn't touch it for me at all. But Unisom and B6 seemed to really help, but I would also say like having, making sure that your gut's supported and your liver is decongested before you get pregnant can be really helpful. Two, yeah, I was like to the point where I actually had to just skip eating anything, even like supplements, and I actually went to it's right. What's it called now? It used to be it's now called the health spa. She does IV nutrition and she was just opening up and she would actually do my prenatals like through an IV because I just could not hang. So I have a lot of sympathy for that problem. But yeah, B6 and Unisom was like what kept me functional during the day for sure. But B6, that's a good example of one where like using full script to get just like isolated B6. Full script is really good for like those one-off nutrients that you want and still want a good quality versus like the whole prenatal. So Okay, if you guys want to get a hold of me, I think that first, I'm gonna flip back, that first slide just has my contact information on it. I'm, don't really check Facebook, but I will check Instagram messages, if that's just an easy way to reach out and ask questions. That's my clinic website on there. And yeah, I'm downtown kind of by the YMCA, Veritas Church, like kind of in that, by the library, the downtown library, kind of in that mix, in a building called Warehouse on Third. And you're able to schedule online. I do offer just fertility consults if that piques your interest. And if you kind of, I call it like the word vomit appointment, where it's like, if you just need to come in, get it all out, and then we make a plan, but I'm also game for that. I love doing that.
If we have an appointment with you in a couple weeks. Predicted
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
I didn't realize it until like 2 days.
No, that's very funny, but yes.
They're the same people. Hold on, like, really buying anything until.
And I would bring whatever you have in with you, like what, we'll
It's just
just.
like a 15-minute appointment, so it'd be the fertility one.
Yeah, but, either way, bring what you got, and then if that's kind of easier for me to go through and, say like, keep, pause. Never again, that kind of thing.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know I saw you like, well, like a year ago or something like that,
Mhm.
but like, I'm doing about right, so, IVF.
Yeah.
And I'm really kind of worried because it seems like pre-implanted is sort of like associated with that. Do you know of any kind of like diet or, supplement stuff like helps with that?
For preeclampsia?
Yeah, or preventing it.
Yeah, so it'd be, antioxidants are gonna be key in that because blood pressure, right, is
Yeah.
the big deal. There is another, there's an herbal called hawthorn that is super good, just HAWTHORN. That is really helpful for blood pressure, men and women kind of across the board there, so that might be an option. But yeah, antioxidants are gonna be that one that keeps your cardiovascular system running smoothly for sure.
I'm in the process of getting off thyroid medication because I'm
Mhm.
trying to do it all naturally.
Yeah.
Is that something you can help with, like?
Yeah, so kind of depending on where, I would like maybe get off for a while and then run your, have them run your labs again. The trick with me running labs is I can run them, they're often not covered by insurance, so if you can get your primary care to run them for cheaper, like just go ahead and have them and then just send me the results and then we can work through it that way. But yeah, a lot of times, we can do just like a natural, like thyroid support that will just kind of help across the board. If it is like one particular, like kind of a trickier part, then we need to get a little creative with the stuff on full script of, especially if it's something like really minute, like your reverse T3, which is a lab that like a lot of times people don't even get to. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what is like, what do you recommend for it?
Yeah, that Vervita company that I had, that Regen Heart product, they have one called Regen Thyroid. That is a really good, just like across the board thyroid support. That one and Orthomolecular also has one that they call them desiccated supplements, which means they're like organ based. Yeah, so which a lot of thyroid medications are, right? Like a lot of the thyroid that you're getting actually prescribed is like dried pig thyroid. Kind of the same thing. You can get that in a supplement as well. You don't necessarily have to have a prescription for that one. So
On that note, I want to start actually just eating liver a day.
good, Godspeed.
Is that, I mean, I'm gonna try, I only have to eat
Yeah.
a little bit a day.
Yes.
Good. But
Yeah.
save money on those pills.
So my grandfather, now my uncle, cattle farmer, like I did not know this, we have access to like all the beef liver in the world, right? So I tried really hard, especially when my first was little, because I was like, I'm just gonna set her taste buds to like liver, and I just couldn't commit for that long. But if you can do it, do it. I think now, like having a break from it, I think I could try again. But with that, one thing to watch is if you're kind of like prone to allergies, keep tabs on your allergies, because that's really the only negative I see. Because a lot of women do bring in like an organ based or like a liver prenatal. If you tend to have have allergic reactions or like high histamines, and sometimes those just carry more histamine. So that's one thing to watch, but if that's not a problem for you, then it's not a problem. So like, some people do really well on.
What are your recommendations besides like what you got?
I like Ion gut support. If you haven't heard of Ion, I like lovingly call it dirt water because they really did take like healthy carbon molecules from the soil and kind of redox those into a clear liquid. And it's really good for sealing up that intestinal lining. I like a product called Shield from Orthomolecular is another one that kind of coats the intestinal lining and helps it rebuild into that privacy fence. What are some other things? Orthomolecular also makes one called SBI Protect that is kind of like trapping toxic stuff that irritates the gut lining and pulling it out before it can poke holes in anything. So that one has been really helpful too, like if gut is your main, if that's your main thing, so.
Is it bad to be on that ion?
I don't think so. I mean, I think some people take it as a preventative, like all the time. And I think too, like we live in Iowa where everything is sprayed constantly. And it's a really good mitigator of glyphosate, all the spray chemicals. All right. Well, I mean, like I said, you guys I get a bunch of weird DMs about the same stuff all the time. Or you can call our office and they can help you out that way too. So either way, love to stay connected with you guys. I really appreciate Hopeful Mama, and they're like babies that I have held this year because they were Hopeful Mama people that were sent my way, and we got to work through some stuff, and it's like I love being able to tell Emily, I'm like, I held a Hopeful Mama baby today. So just a huge testament to all the stuff that she's doing and setting up and bringing together, because it like really is, I mean, just totally life changing. So just a great organization, and I'm glad you guys showed up and glad to be here.